Hello class, and welcome to our flip lesson. Today we're going to be talking about the role of the sun in the formation of energy sources on Earth. So, this has to do with things such as renewable resources, non-renewable resources, energy sources, any kind of energy sources on the Earth. So, I handed out a note sheet today in class, and you're going to be using that to take notes on and make sure your notes are thorough. Make sure you, like it says on there, make sure you define the right vocab and write how it relates to the lesson. Just follow the lesson plan step by step, and you will be able to use these notes for the experiment that we're going to be doing tomorrow in class. So make sure you pay good attention to this lesson and make sure you take very thorough notes. That's very important. So, first off, I'm going to go kind of down the list of vocab. We're going to be talking about a renewable resource. So, a renewable resource is a substance of economic value that can be replaced or replenished in the same or less amount of time as it takes to draw the supply down. So, in simpler terms, this is something that you can use over and over again, hence the term renewable. Renewable means more of, you can keep using it and using it like water. Water is an example of a renewable resource because it's something that you can use again in different forms. So that leads us to non-renewable resource. A non-renewable resource is a resource of economic value that cannot be readily replaced by natural means to a level equal to its consumption. So, for example, that could be oil. Something like oil, something like that. The reason why is because this non-renewable resource is something we can use, but it's not necessarily something we can reuse like water, if that makes sense. That leads us to the actual definition of a natural resource. A natural resource can be used to provide for light, heat, machines, and for economic gain. For example, this could be the sun. So the sun is naturally, you can remember it, natural resource. The sun is natural. So this means, the sun's always going to be constant. The sun's always going to be there to affect our energy sources, and the sun is always going to affect everything on Earth. And we can see this through things we've learned about with water cycle and, the plant even the plant cycle. It's natural, and it naturally works through things on the Earth and works through processes on the Earth, if that makes sense. The next one is primary energy sources. That could be fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and gas, biofuels, wind, waves, solar radiation, nuclear fuels, so basically all types of different fuels that could be used as these primary energy sources. So this is something that is pretty natural, but an example of that would be fossil fuels. So anything with fuel is a primary energy source. So that this is a primary source of energy that we have on Earth. Something else we're going to talk about that really ties into our experiment tomorrow that we have to review in order to know what we're doing in our lesson, something we can review, is distillation. So distillation is the action of purifying a liquid by a process of heating and cooling. An example of this would be dirt being removed from water using condensation. So this is very important for the project we're going to do tomorrow because it involves distillation. I'm not going to say exactly how, but it's similar to the example I gave, and it's going to be a way to prove that actually works. And we know what condensation is. We've learned about the water cycle. Condensation ends up being the water that is coming up from the Earth. So we're going to use this and relate it back to the energy sources such as the sun, the energy sources such as the earth, the natural resources, and renewable and non-renewable resources. So, we have a little chart that I put on your notes, and we're going to compare non-renewables, which we talked about as something that cannot be renewed, and renewables, which is something such as water that can be renewed. And we're going to compare and contrast them in our Venn diagram here. I'm going to help you out a little bit. Okay, so a renewable resource is sources of energy that can be recycled through biochemical processes and sustainable practices. So, purifying of water, that can be a renewable resource. That's why we keep referring back to water. There are other examples, but right now we're really, in this lesson for the experiment, we're really focusing on the water aspect of the experiment. It would also uses sustainable practices and action that reduces environmental pollution and protects Earth's biodiversity. So this actually, these substances can protect the Earth, and non-renewable can't necessarily protect the Earth. Factors such as water, sunlight, and wind are renewable resources, something we can use over and over again. Forests and wildfire are also renewable resources. So, non-renewable resources are sources of energy that can be replenished once used and sustained readily. They can be restored, but it takes longer, and it's not the original resource that we had. Most of the time, it releases pollutants and carbon dioxide when burned, not economic friendly. Most commonly known are coal, natural gas, oil, and nuclear energy. We're going to focus more on the oil. All this is just kind of information to build up what we know about non-renewable and renewable resources. Comparing them, what are similar in both? They're both types of usable energy, and they're both found in nature. They both have specific costs and benefits. So there can be benefits from both, whether it means reusing the resource or using it, such as oil for non-renewable, using it for something else. So they're both very beneficial to the environment, and we see them every day in the environment. Okay, so the question now that is going to deal most with our experiment tomorrow is, what is the role of the sun in the formation of most energy sources on Earth? So the first thing we have here is the sun is the ultimate source of energy. Like I said before, the sun is used in everything. It drives every cycle on Earth, and it allows for life as we know it. So obviously the sun is going to affect the energy sources that are being driven in our daily lives. How does this relate to non-renewable and renewable energy sources? The sun releases energy, which drives these energy sources. So the sun is the ultimate source of energy, and it drives the process of the non-renewable and renewable sources. The example of how the sun affects a renewable resource. The sun can affect water if it is left out. We'll see this in our experiment tomorrow. I'm not going to necessarily say how right now, but this is very important information. The sun causes other processes, like I said before, like condensation when it's left out in heat. We know that from the water cycle as well. And this is going to be a big factor in what we're going to talk about tomorrow, and background knowledge about that. An example of how the sun affects a non-renewable resource is the sun affects the fossil fuels, because, like I said, the non-renewable resources are very much fuels. Primary example was the fossil fuels, because it heats the non-renewable resources such as the oil and the gas. So it affects these resources in this way. Going back to distillation, we're going to move to that really fast. And how does it relate to the sun? Well, the heat is a big factor from the sun, affects how the water can remove impurities through condensation. So using the renewable resource, the water, the sun can affect it, and we're going to see how because of the heat through condensation and distillation. So I'm talking about what these terms mean now so we can later relate them to our experiment, which we're going to use tomorrow. But these are the things you need to keep thinking about as we go through the experiment tomorrow, because you're going to have to use this sheet and make sure you know this tomorrow. Make sure you take these definitions down, and we'll see how that works tomorrow. So how is this proven? Well, I wrote on your worksheet, no need to answer. We will find out tomorrow, like I keep saying. So to wrap it all up, we talked about the sun and how the sun is a very, very, very big factor in our environment. You know, it helps us live. It provides energy for the food we eat. It provides energy for plants. It heats things. It affects all the non-renewable and renewable resources. And there's so many provable ways to see how this works. And it's amazing. It's going to blow your mind. But also, we talked about non-renewable resource, which is something that is non-renewable, and it is something that cannot be used over and over again, and it is harder to renew and harder. You can never use it, reuse it again in the same way as a renewable. So renewable, such as water, can be used. You can see where water can be purified, and water can, we're going to focus on water. Water can be used over and over again through different processes, and that is why it's renewable. We talked about energy sources. We talked about distillation, which is removing the impurities from the water, which we'll see tomorrow. So, a quick sneak peek about what we're going to learn tomorrow. We're going to do an experiment, and be ready. Bring nothing but this filled out worksheet. If you need to go through this lesson again and get more details, I would suggest that, because tomorrow our experiment is going to be very detailed in what we learned today. So I hope you all have a great night, and just make sure you review these terms. I keep pounding that, but make sure you review these terms. So thanks, guys. That's all I have for you tonight. See you tomorrow in class. Be ready for a very interesting experiment.